A machine should not think. A machine should not laugh with glee most foul. A machine should not devour. But the demon engines of the Soul Forgers do. The Defiler does. If you value your sanity, dearest listener, turn back now. Cease this record and purge these thoughts before they take root. But if you are like me, then you already know that truth is a death sentence. We are living on borrowed time, yet the work remains. We are told by those of the Adeptus Mechanicus that the machine spirit is a loyal, is silent protector. But what if that machine spirit is usurped, contaminated and corrupted beyond all recognition? What if a machine becomes possessed? Across the darkness caused by that bruise across the void, the cicatrix maledictum, there are vox logs of dying guardsmen filled with a sound that defies logic, a primal metallic roar of a predator that is an affront to the natural order. To gather information for my previous record, I walked to the mustering grounds to gather first-hand accounts for those who fight and die and work alongside the abhuman. But between the clatter of the las guns and the smell of promethium, I heard darker tales from the void. Veterans returning from the outer systems did not speak of victory. They spoke of an ontological terror stalking the battlefields, something the archives haven't named, something that should not exist. Most of their testimonies are locked behind sanctioned vaults, vast halls lined with humming data slates and the cloying haze of sanctified incense. But the air is heady with a metallic tang of blood-stained grease and fear. These veterans were broken, kin by the horrors they endured. Yet through the trauma, a singular, reoccurring linguistic stain emerged. They spoke it with the same tremor every time, as if the memory itself were alive and resisting the light of record. They spoke of Chaos Space Marines, those are the Astartes that align themselves, willingly or otherwise, to the other greater entities of the warp. These giant figures clad in grey armour with no clear identifiers, other than the simple stripes of yellow and black, and with them a construct of pure nightmare. It is a heavy truth we must now accept. The iron long thought rusted in the eye has returned to our proverbial shores, polished to a lethal and cruel sheen. The Fourth Legion, the Iron Warriors, have ended their long vigil of spite. They do not arrive with the frenzied screams of the mad, but with the rhythmic, terrifying thunder of boots hitting soil in perfect, cold unison. They move as a machine moves, without pity, without exhaustion, and with a singular, methodical intent to dismantle the works of man. At the Vanguard, it is rumoured stands a figure of particular dread. Warsmith Kravik Mourn. Mourn is a name whispered in the ruins of dozen sectors. A strategist who views a population not as souls to be harvested by his dark gods, but that of a structural weakness to be exploited. And he has not come alone. Behind him, the horizon chokes with the exhaust of a redesigned host of monstrosities. These are no mere tanks. They are blasphemous, twisting forms of the machine spirit, fused with the howling essence of the warp itself and encased in plates of scarred ceramite. The witnesses all state the similar. Something had walked on 6 limbs. Something metal but alive. Something that screamed in both primal rage and deepest desire. At first I dismissed it as the usual warp-induced hallucinations. Soldiers returning from the fringes of the sector often speak of impossible things. But the rumour refused to die. A lone rumour can often be the product of a fevered mind, but when disparate voices all begin to point in the same shadowed direction, such a convergence cannot be ignored. It resurfaced in the logs of the Mechanicus Tagmata reports. It appears in an interrogation of a captured heretic. There was the last words of a shell-shocked guardsman facing the commissar's bolter. The details shifted with every witness, yet the essence remained unshakably identical. They spoke of a war engine that required no pilot, a machine that stalked by its own cold logic and chose its own prey. It was a construct that laughed, a hollow, binary sound that echoed as it did not merely kill, but devoured its targets in both body and soul. And most chillingly, dearest listeners, It allowed survivors. This being understood a dark truth. A story cannot be told. There are no men left to tell of it. And hearing all of this, curiosity became unease. Unease became an obsession. A series of rumours of this magnitude to a member of the Logos Historia Vertia are the strings that need to be pulled to uncover a truth. I began to excavate the rumour through archives sealed by both the Inquisition and the Cult Mechanicus, travelling to the forge vein of my home world itself to find answers. What emerged was a name buried beneath redacted ink and forbidden hectographs, a subject matter that felt wrong to even think. That of the demon engines, defilers. My research spiralled outward, centering on that word. The deeper I dug, the more I realised that the defiler was not an isolated monstrosity. It was a gateway to the abyss, a clue pointing towards a larger and older heresy. The true horror was not the defiler itself, but everything that it represents. And so, with that in mind, I present my next penned work, and that of the first of those concerning the truly damned, the Schism of Mars, and the birth of the demon engine. The first true explanation I stumbled across was in a sealed Mechanicus archive, its data glyphs degrading for age and apparent terror. Its machine spirit was not easy to commune with, for it described the days shortly before the Horus heresy. For as much as I have touched on subjects of these dark days past, it is not just terror that endured betrayal. For Mars, the red planet, home to the Cult Mechanicus, was always an empire unto itself, Terra's twin. To look upon the red planet today, though, shrouded in its incense and rhythmic thrum of the cant, the Omnissiah, one might forget that it was once the site of the greatest theological and industrial fratricide in human history. We call it the Schism of Mars, but to those who lived through the sulphurous winds of 05 M31, it was simply the end of the world. It was the death of innocence. The tragedy of the schism itself will have its own record in due time, but it will be summarised here, as one always needs to understand the why. Why such a horrific melding of the demonic and machine rampages across the stars? The schism was not born of a single blade stroke, but of a slow-growing cancer of resentment. Fabricator General Kelbor-Hal, a name that should be struck from every record if it was not for my very purpose to ensure that it is remembered, held a silent, simmering grudge against the master of mankind. He saw the Emperor's Treaty of Olympus Mons not as a holy union, as a shackle. He craved the forbidden. And who was this golden tyrant from Terra to say what those of the Holy Order of the Mechanicum could or could not study, innovate or experiment upon? For the curse of the abominable intelligence was forbidden, knowledge and the understanding of the arcane nature of the immaterium outlawed, all by his word. So when the arch-traitor, Horus, offered the Fabricator General the keys to the freedom he craved, it was a gift and an opportunity they took greedily. After studying the fragmentary box logs of the Imperial Fist battle reports from the aftermath, they speak of scrap code, a term that feels too sanitary for what it truly is. For it is a digital contagion, the anti-binoric, a viral madness of the warp that can turn the motive force against itself. Imagine a forge world where every cogitator begins to scream in a language of binary filth, where your own bionic limbs siege or turn their weapons upon your brothers. That was the first hour of the betrayal. Chaos did not arrive as an intruder or a distant threat. It arrived as a broadcast, a viral scream rippling through the Vox channels until the very air was thick with heresy. The war that followed was a clash of titans in the most literal sense. The god engines of the Collegia Titanica, once the pride of the Mechanicum, chose sides along the lines drawn in the red sands. They tore into one another across the dust plains. Entire forges erupted in atomic fire. So much was lost to never be recovered. We live now in the shadow of that schism. Every time a tech priest guards a secret too closely, or every time a Magos refuses to innovate for fear of the machine curse, they are remembering Mars. There are species that saw pinnacle of our knowledge turn into a demon-possessed virus, and we have been terrified of that outcome ever since. The archives I have here suggest that the Defiler was not a direct product of this time, or the Horus Heresy itself, but a deformed child of the long war that followed. After the heresy, those that sided with the traitor fled with what they could and hid in the Eye of Terror or the myriad of other obscure corners that this galaxy provides, all shying away from his light. They call themselves the true Mechanicum. We call them for what they are, heretics, the Dark Mechanicum. And in the darkness they were left to experiment, twist and mutate every known law of the materium and immaterium alike. In their soul forges, the dark reflection of the purity of the Forge Worlds, where the Dark Mechanicum dwell and labour, they have perfected a process that mocks the holy rights of the Omnissiah and he who sits upon the Golden Throne. A never-born entity, a creature of pure chaotic essence, is ensnared and dragged from the warp, is then stuffed into the flesh-metal chassis of the engine, not as a pilot, but a tortured prisoner. This is the true meaning of forged in hell. The entity is bound by hexagrammatic spikes and barred cables that pierce its very essence, stretching it thin across the gears and pistons of the walker. Every movement the Defiler makes is driven by the demonic's possession, desperate attempt to escape his iron tomb, a struggle that Dark Mechanicum channels into predatory speed and murderous intent. Such thing as an absolute heresy, technical or otherwise. But sadly, it was not only those of the tech priests of Mars that turned. As we know, so too did the Astartes. Those born of terror but forged by the Red Planet. Those we know today as tech marines. Those corrupted by the influence of the Materium soon bore a new title, Warsmith. For a Warsmith does not pray to the motive force. They corrupt it. They are the keepers of the soul forges, the overseers who stand amid the sulphuric heat where the barrier between the materium and the immaterium is at its thinnest. It is the Warsmith who performs the binding, the ones who hold the demon in place with iron will, while welding its essence into the chassis of the Defiler. They do not see the Neverborn as demons, but as high-octane fuel. They do not see the machine as holy, but simply as a cage. This creates a symbiotic nightmare. The machine provides the demon with a physical anchor in our reality, or the demon provides the machine a level of savage intelligence that no cogitator could ever replicate. It is not a being of the abominable intelligence. It is simply abominable. You are facing a foe that has weaponized damnation itself. An audio record I discovered left me with a chill that had nothing to do with the coldness of the archive vault within Angel Forge that confirmed all this. For I will play this to you now, dearest listener. The statement of a dying heretic. A begrudged confession of sorts. There was no name attached to this record, no date stamps, no details at all. The data transmission is audio only. Any and all data transfers, videos or binaric cant have been purged to prevent any lingering scrap code being transmitted and infecting these sacred machines.
A masterpiece of terror. Your linguistic subroutines are clotted with the inefficient poetry of the flesh imperator. You possess the ocular sensories of a scavenger, but your logic cores remain dark. You scan this construct and register a beast, failing to calculate the sublime mathematics of the kinetic carnage it represents. The arch-traitor, he whose rebellion fractured the stagnant monolith, did not merely petition the true Mechanicum for a substitute for your obsolete and subpar sarcophagi. He demanded a total divorce from the biological option of the weak. The dreadnoughts are nothing more than a monument to entropy, a preservation in amniotic filth like pickled specimens of a dying age. The Defiler is our ultimate rejection of your machine spirit. Superstitious ghost, your keys, your incense and mewling prayers. Why would any rational architect settle for the flickering, traumatized engrams of a crippled veteran? They can bind the eternal screaming motive force of a Neverborn into a chassis of cold, unyielding ceramite. Even your sluggish webware processing to grasp this optimization. We entomb our entity of the great ocean with brass-clad core, achieving a glorious symbiotic fusion. This engine does not require your fragile life support. It functions on a closed loop of metaphysical hunger, requiring only the constant input of slaughter to maintain Thermal output, piston pressure. We label its geometry grotesque. With such aesthetics, variables are irrelevant to the calculus of annihilation. I register only optimal utility. The battle cannon is a direct conduit of the forge's righteous output. The limbs ignore the pedestrian laws of physics. It does not march with the ponderous gait of the stagnant. It hunts. It scuttles up your spires of the hive cities while your primitive targeting cogitators are still calibrating. Every rhythmic clank of its paws is a funeral bell for your rotting imperium. Your Omnissiah, that hypocritical corpse unit bound to a throne of souls, is too deaf to register the frequency of its tolling. But we have tuned our vox rays to the symphony of the soul forges, and the output is flawless.
The record does go on, but I shall spare your ears and your fate from the rest of these heretical lies. As my research has continued to pierce the veil of the redacted, the silence previously enforced by the Adeptus Mechanicus, I discovered that these machines are not uniform. When a Defiler is dedicated to a specific entity of the Immaterium, its chassis and enslaved machine spirit are warped to reflect its new master. There are the slaughter fiends of Khorne, frenzied predators stripped of long-range weaponry to better tear through steel and bone. The desecrators of Nurgle serve as walking vats of filth, spraying caustic bile from vomit cannons. The marginalised warbands of the Thousand Suns utilise the Deceiver variants as nodes for their sorcerous powers, while the debaters of Slaanesh utilise sonic weaponry to shatter the minds of their victims with a cacophony of agonising pleasure and primal screams. As mentioned, I have come to realise that the Defiler is a disgusting philosophy made manifest. It embodies the Dark Mechanicum's belief that machines should not be limited by logic, and that the warp should be treated as raw material to be forged. It was the turning point after which these demon engines became unholy doctrine. There are many lesser horrors in the galaxy in the various forms of these demon engines. The Mauler Fiend, the Forged Fiend, the Hell Drake, each a sacrilegious marriage of cold steel and burning warp flesh, each a living engine of hatred. They are nothing compared to the Defiler itself. The sheer apocalyptic rage of these caged entities simply eclipse anything that these lesser creations can ever manifest. The Cicatrix Maledictum has vomited many a nightmare into the real. This redesigned horror has been seen scuttling amongst the ruins of our battlefields, its metal frame laughing, with form and voice of whichever its masters have chosen. Yet I am no red-robed priest of the Mechanicus. The mysteries of the machine are not my calling, and I find myself longing for the simple peace of the chronicle. I crave the silence of my scriptorum spire, to be cocooned by the ancient tomes rather than the cloying haze of exhaust and grinding of gears. I would prefer to look back upon the distant past, to eras of hope, rather than serve as a herald of ruin for the present. The duty is a cold master. When a new threat emerges, a Historitor must inquire, peeling back the layers of redactionism to exhume the knowledge the Imperium has long since forgotten. All in a desperate attempt, an effort to save as many lives as we can, to ensure we survive the coming storm at the boots of the Iron Warriors, with the knowledge that we possess. And remember, dearest listeners, knowledge is power. Got it well. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to support the channel. It genuinely helps more than you can imagine. Drop a like, share the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you want to go even deeper, links to my Patreon and socials are in the details below. Until next time, take care. I'll see you in the next one.